So, could we see a new stable in Impact Wrestling? Well, this past week on Impact Wrestling on AXS TV, we possibly saw the formation of a new stable involving Sami Callihan, Eric Young, and Ken Shamrock. Now, during the main event match, which was Sami Callihan teaming up with Eric Young, they defeated Impact World Champion Rich Swann and Eddie Edwards. Now, at the end of the match, Rich Swann locked in the sharpshooter on Callihan, while Eddie Edwards locked in a half Boston Crab on Eric Young. Now, it looked like Sami Callihan was about to tap out, but Eric Young stopped his hand from hitting a mat. This is when Ken Shamrock came down to ringside and sent the Impact World Champion Rich Swann into the steel ring steps at ringside. Meanwhile, Sami Callihan connected with a pile driver on Eddie Edwards to get the victory. And then, interestingly, very, very interestingly, as Impact Wrestling on AXS TV went off of the air, Sami Callihan, Ken Shamrock and Eric Young all stood tall together, leading some to speculate, could this be the formation of a brand new heel main event faction in Impact Wrestling? Now, could this be, as I mentioned, a stable in Impact going forward? Now, I think if you look at Eric Young, and to me, Eric Young, at this point, after all of the matches he's had since his return, he kind of now needs something to do in Impact Wrestling, because if you look at what's happened recently to EY, he lost to Rich Swann at Bound for Glory, lost in the main event, lost the Impact World Championship. Rich Swann is now the Impact World Champion. And then following that, he also lost once again to Rich Swann on the following episode of Impact Wrestling. So it would appear to me that he's out of chances, Eric Young, when it comes to the Impact World Championship. So he needs to do something different now. He needs to move on. So could Eric Young now move to a feud with someone else on the Impact Wrestling roster right now? Of course he could. Of course he could. But the question there is who? Who does Eric Young go on to feud with? Because if you look at the lay of the land right now, if you look at where everyone is going in the Impact Wrestling roster, there aren't many names, big names, worthy of facing an Eric Young that are available right now to feud with. Everyone else is tied up in their own thing. So I think if you're honest, you have to look at his feud with Rich Swann too, because this feud that Eric Young had and still has, it looks like, with Rich Swann, is a deeply personal feud. It stretches back all the way to July. Of course, during July, Eric Young returned at the Slammiversary pay-per-view along with Rich Swann, but during that match for the Impact World Championship, he attacks Rich Swann at Slammiversary, forces Rich Swann to retire. After Rich Swann retires, he attacks him once again. After that, Eric Young then wins the World Championship from Eddie Edwards. Rich Swann returns. They face off at Bound for Glory. And with all of that that's happened over the last few months, despite 2 championship losses back to back, I don't think that just goes away. That feud, that hatred, that heated issue that they have doesn't just go away in the storyline. Now, if I'm going to be brutally honest here, do I want Eric Young and the Rich Swann feud to continue? I don't think so. I do think that feud has run its course. It's been going on since July, so July to the end of October, a little bit into November too. I think it's probably done now. I do think it's probably done, but on the flip side of things, and this is the issue that I suppose the Impact executives and officials have, I don't just think the feud can't just disappear like nothing's happened either. It's going to have to taper off, should I say. So I don't think the feud between Eric Young and Rich Swann can just disappear, and I'm not sure if Eric Young can specifically move on to something completely different just because he's lost 2 Impact World Championship matches. Now, I do think when it comes to Rich Swann and the Impact World Championship, I do think Rich Swann will eventually feud with Moose for the Impact World Championship. That looks to be like the direction that they're going in. I think at the big pay-per-view, the next big pay-per-view, which is in January of 2021, the Hard to Kill pay-per-view, I do think the main event of that show will be Rich Swann versus Moose for the Impact World Championship. However, in the interim, it looks like we're going to go off on a bit of a diversion here, because it looks like Rich Swann is going to feud with Sami Callihan over the next few weeks or the next few months, because Sami Callihan is facing Rich Swann at the Turning Point event on Impact Plus in a few weeks' time, and that is going to be for the Impact World Championship. So before we get to Rich Swann versus Moose, I think we're going to have Rich Swann feud with Sami Callihan, Ken Shamrock and Eric Young as a stable as we head into Turning Point in a couple of weeks. So in the last few weeks and the last couple of months, we've actually seen this alliance of Sami Callihan and Ken Shamrock, and I'm actually quite fascinated by this alliance. It does interest me because I think it has a lot of potential. I think it protects Ken Shamrock, which is very important. Obviously, he's not the Ken Shamrock of what he was 20 years ago. He is older and he can't be wrestling every week, but he can still make appearances. So I do think it has potential. And obviously Sami Callihan was in the corner of Ken Shamrock when the World's Most Dangerous Man defeated Eddie Edwards at Bound for Glory a couple of weeks ago. Now obviously, previously, Shamrock and Callihan were rivals, and there was fireballs thrown, and then they were turned into reluctant teammates. They challenged the Norfolk Slammiversary in an unsuccessful attempt to win the World Tag Team Championship, and now they're full-blown heel tag team partners, and there certainly is an alliance there. Now, from the Ken Shamrock side of things, I've always preferred Ken Shamrock as a heel, even back during his time with WWE in the Attitude Era. I felt then, and I still do feel now, even in 2020, that Ken Shamrock does his best work as a heel. And I like the dynamic, and I like the potential of Ken Shamrock, the Hall of Famer, a legit badass MMA icon, doing the bidding, as it were, of Sami Callihan, and just Sami Callihan almost controlling the rage of Ken Shamrock. And like I said, it protects Shamrock. He doesn't have to have matches every week. He can make appearances, and you save those Ken Shamrock matches for big pay-per-view events or big events on Impact Plus or big TV events. Now, when it comes to Sami Callihan, of course, Callihan does previously have history with Rich Swann in Impact Wrestling. That's well documented, and obviously everyone knows the history that Sami Callihan has with Eddie Edwards too. That's why Shamrock faced Eddie Edwards at Bound for Glory. So, to me, if I'm trying to read where Impact are going with this, to me it looks like Impact they're essentially merging the Rich Swann versus Eric Young and Eddie Edwards versus Callihan and Shamrock feuds together here, and that's what we get at Turning Point. That's why we're getting Sami Callihan versus Rich Swann for the Impact World Championship at Turning Point. I think potentially when you look at that match, you could have Callihan with Young and Shamrock in his corner, and then you've got Swann with Eddie Edwards in his corner. And obviously you could pair off there that maybe Eric Young faces an Eddie Edwards at Turning Point too. So I don't think Sami Callihan is going to win the World Championship at Turning Point. To me, that just doesn't seem likely at this point. And obviously, I think the main reason for that is Rich Swann only won the Impact World Championship a few weeks ago at Bound for Glory. So if I'm going to predict what happens when it comes to Rich Swann's World Championship reign, I think Rich Swann will, at the very, very least, hold the Impact World Championship until the Hard to Kill event in January of 2021. I do think, though, when it comes to Sami Callihan, it's very, very interesting that Callihan is getting this renewed push of having a World Championship opportunity and featured match, featured point on the show, potentially a new stable of heaters, when it's been reported that Sami Callihan's contract is set to expire at the end of the year. Now, the announcement that Callihan's contract was set to expire at the end of the year was actually in an interview done in 2019, but Callihan himself did announce that his contract was set to expire at the end of 2020. Now, since then, since he made that announcement in an interview in 2019, and as I mentioned, it was in an interview a year ago, obviously a lot can change in a year. Look at the world right now. Obviously, a lot can change in a year. But since then, we haven't really heard that much, really, when it comes to the future of Sami Callihan. So I think if you look at the lay of the land right now and you look at the way that Callihan's being booked on TV, as I said, he's got a World Championship match, stable of heaters, Shamrock and Callihan won at Bound for Glory. It does suggest that he would stay with Impact Wrestling. But if you also look at the lay of the land when it comes to other promotions and other companies, that could be an option to Sami Callihan. You have to question, realistically, where does Sami Callihan go? I mean, he certainly doesn't go back to WWE. Obviously, previously he had a run in NXT. He had the hacking gimmick that he's kind of brought to Impact now, but it wasn't good. He was wearing a strange outfit. What was he? His name was Solomon Crow or something like that. Triple H was not a fan of the gimmick, and Sami Callihan really, for that matter. So I don't think Callihan has any desires to get back into that system, and I'm not even sure WWE wants him to go back. I don't think Sami Callihan goes to AEW either. I don't see where he fits in the roster. That is a big and deep roster. Obviously, AEW are launching a second show on TNT later this year. They've said 2020. I mean, it's November now. We've only got a couple of months left of the year, so I don't know what's happening with that. But does Callihan go on to that show, or does he go to AEW? I don't think he does. And obviously, then if you look at other promotions, he definitely doesn't go back to MLW for their proposed restart in a couple of weeks. And they've already held those tapings and he didn't appear there. Now, obviously, people will say, well, what about Ring of Honor? You know, he could go there, but I don't think he goes there either. I think he's just got so much stock in Impact Wrestling, and he's been a consistent player in Impact Wrestling for, what, 3 years now, maybe longer? So I think he's woven into the fabric there. I think a lot of people backstage like him. Obviously, there have been rumors of flare-ups occasionally, but it's pro wrestling, that happens. But there have been reports that the executives like him, Don Callis, Scott D'Amore like him, the talent likes him. So I think Sami Callihan will stay with Impact. And honestly, to be honest, considering that just because we haven't heard about it, I wouldn't be surprised if Callihan has already signed a new deal or at the very, very least had discussions about what a new contract looks like, when he'll sign it, all that kind of stuff. So I don't see Sami Callihan going anywhere, to be honest. But this potential stable of Eric Young, Ken Shamrock and Sami Callihan does excite me quite a lot. Why? Because I love a stable. I love a stable. I think factions in professional wrestling, yes, they've been overdone. And you look at the late 90s, it was almost like everyone had a faction and it was faction warfare. But who doesn't love a stable? If it's done right, stables can be awesome. They can add a sense of chaos to the show, or just they can be cool. They can be really, really cool. And I don't think, if you look at Impact right now, do we really have a real good stable in Impact right now? I mean, I suppose you could call the Rascals a stable, right? Trey Miguel, Des Wentz, you could call them a stable, but I mean a legitimate main event stable, a stable that can take over the show. A stable of Eric Young, Ken Shamrock and Sami Callihan, that's a main event stable in Impact Wrestling. That's 3 former Impact World Champions. 3 main event talents all together under the same umbrella right there. So that is a big deal if we have a stable here. And again, I don't know, just looked, there was a little bit there that sort of teased it at the end of Impact that said to me, well, there might be something more there. So that would be a big deal, and they all have similar yet slightly different characters. I think the similarity between all 3 of them, the similarity between Eric Young, Sami Callihan and Ken Shamrock, is that you have these characters that are loose cannons, they're wild, they're unpredictable, and they can all be very, very violent. You have Eric Young, the world-class maniac, former world champion, showed in his feud with Rich Swann that he's ruthless, he's relentless, everything by design. He's not scared of violence, controlled chaos. He's a master manipulator with a plan. Then also you compare that to Ken Shamrock, the world's most dangerous man. He's a legend, Hall of Famer in both Impact and UFC, first ever world champion in Impact Wrestling history, and a man who has a career and is well known for being crazy, violent, has a short temper, a very, very short fuse, and similar to Eric Young in that regard. And then obviously, finally, you have Sami Callihan, who's, again, a former world champion, controversial to say the very, very least. He's wild, he's crazy, he's got a short temper, he's aggressive, he's smashed Eddie Edwards in the face with a baseball bat, and then he's also got this sort of controlled gimmick in terms of the hacker and a master manipulator, pulling the puppet strings and trying to control people, trying to stay a step ahead of people. So there is similarities between all 3 of them, which again, I think makes them a very interesting stable if it does happen. So I'm very, very excited to see if this does become a legitimate stable in Impact Wrestling, because I do think there's a gap there in Impact for a stable. I think Impact knows that, and I think that's why they previously teased the likes of the Aces and Eights in the summer, because they know there is a desire to see that stable that takes over Impact. Now, it wasn't Aces and Eights, obviously. That was a red herring to get people talking and excited, which it did. So I hope this is a faction that comes together between all 3 men, and I'm very excited to see what happens next with them. So we'll have to wait and see in the coming weeks if indeed there is a faction or a stable here, or if it was just the way that Impact Wrestling ended this week. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on this new potential stable in Impact Wrestling of Sami Callihan, Ken Shamrock and Eric Young? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be sure to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, chatting about pro wrestling, chatting about Impact Wrestling in the comments. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button as well. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.